So far in our little voyage across the Revit toolbar, we've been drawing items which are fairly standard and can kind of be picked out of a catalog. There are many items which can be created in Revit which are somewhat more complicated. One, which I'm not going to talk about today, is kind of next along the toolbar, which is curtain systems, mainly because I want to save that for a later discussion when we talk about conceptual massing. Instead, I'm going to show you a type of ready-made curtain wall that's in the Revit interface that is much easier to use and actually is really nice for our little project. Put a little kind of storefront style window in front of our building. Now, to do that, we need to see the front of the building. If you remember, we turned on a section plane and then we hid it, or a section box. Let's unhide that section box. I'm just going to click the little Reveal Hidden Elements button down here. Looks like a light bulb. And there's my section box. Oh, how I miss you, section box. And I can manipulate it here in this view. I can also unhide it by just selecting it here, and there's the unhide element. Or you could also right-click on it to do that. All right, so now I can see the front of the building, and I can also open up a floor plan, and that's a good place to draw our next element. I'm going to go to the ground floor here, and in fact I can even do window tile so that you can see both parts of my project at the same time. And this is nice so you can see what we're doing. Now, basically, we learned that you can draw a wall, right? And we can go here, and I'll be in plan, and I can draw a wall. And I'd like this to be a particular size. Let's go with about 14 feet wide, okay? And if you remember, you can select the wall, and there are all sorts of parameters. So, for example, if I wanted to have a base offset, start a certain amount above the ground, I'm going to just type in 2 and enter. If you hit apply, you can see the wall move. And I can also make it a specific height. I think we'd like something really nice and tall, maybe 8 feet wide. And I'll just hit enter or apply here, and like magic, you can see in this view that the window is created, or the wall is created. Now you might say that doesn't look like a storefront window, now does it? But we can quite easily change this into something that looks like a window by just going to the drop-down list here, the family selector at the very top. And if you look, there's a whole bunch of walls that are kind of standard. We've been using generic walls, right? And a generic 8 inch is fine for an exterior wall. Down here, we can turn this into 3 related things. These are all kind of ready-made curtain walls. And I'm going to choose the storefront system, because that's kind of what this is. And what you'll see is immediately the window changes what it looks like. It actually has kind of divided lights in it. And like many Revit objects, but this is a complex object, there are basic parameters we can change here in the main menu, the sort of menu which is available here for this instance. These are called instance parameters. However, there are what are called type parameters. So if we change this, it will change every instance of this family. So you do want to be careful. And you can certainly duplicate the storefront and make it unique for our project. So for example, I could choose this duplicate object and call it storefront for our project. Clever, eh? And this way, if I have any other storefront in this project, it won't be affected. So what can we change here? Let's stretch this menu out a little bit so we can see it a little better. And basically, we can change all sorts of elements. First of all, the type of object that it is. It's meant for an exterior window. It has these other things, but we can change the vertical spacing here. It's just by default set to 5 feet. I think I'm going to make that, let's see, how about 1 foot wide by 2 foot tall. I think that'll look pretty good. And of course, I'm designing as I go, so it may not look exactly the way we want, but let me hit apply, and you can see here that the windows have changed. And if you look here in the menu, farther down, there are further definitions for the mullions, the vertical mullions and the horizontal ones, and I can change both the interior ones and the border ones. And I can just choose, I'm going to choose a smaller one. Again, I'm just picking these standard ones right now. These can be customized. You just need a custom profile for them that's formatted in the correct way. But you can see here now, kind of starting to look like a window. And I'll click OK. And this window is still not attached to the building. You see how it's farther away. But the beauty of using the storefront system here, I'm going to grab this wall in plan. And remember, you have to grab the wall to be able to edit it. And I'm going to change the distance here. Let's make this so about 7 feet off the wall. Okay, and you can see I like using round numbers because I can just type them in and they're already feet. And now I can just drag this wall into this curtain wall into the wall, and look what happens. It actually breaks the wall. It breaks it so that it looks as if it's a window. And in fact, you can see you can see inside the building now. So it really is a window. This is why I like the storefront system. Not all curtain walls will behave quite so well, but this one works very well. The next type of object that shows up on our toolbar here is a simple object called a railing. Simple, but not so simple. I'm just going to click on the railing tool. And sort of like our other tools that we use that have a sketch mode, the floor and the roof, this has a sketch mode. There's some familiar looking drawing tools, including the pick line tool. And I could just choose to pick the line that is the edge of the second floor. However, I do know that these railings kind of have a thickness to them. So I'm going to just nudge it up an inch or so. And you can see here that the location of the kind of center line of the railing changes when I do that. And what's nice about railings is they are linear elements. They don't need to be in closed loops. So I'm basically done here. I'll click the check mark, and like magic, you see a railing show up on my mezzanine. And in plan, it also fills it in. There's a thickness now to that line that's representative of the top bar. Now, what if you don't like this railing? For example, this is actually a guardrail, so it's probably not tall enough. And I could figure out how tall it was by looking at the type. So if I choose Edit Type, I'll come in here and it'll tell me it's 3 feet tall. All right, and this is based on the structure of the handrail itself. So the simplest thing I can do is just, rather than try and fiddle with this one, I'm going to just choose one that's actually a guardrail. And if you go here to the family selector, I can choose a different family type. So these are a railing family, and these are the different family types. And I'll just choose guardrail rectangular, and you can see that it suddenly got just a wee bit taller. Okay, and that is because it's a different family type. And these are just ready-made railings. We can modify this if we so choose. As with other elements, you have to select it first to be able to modify the family. And remember, this will change all instances of this particular railing in your project. So if you think you have other guardrails, rectangular guardrails in your project, be sure to duplicate this, and you can give it some name which indicates what its plan is, what you're using it for. But then I'll look at my properties here, and which one is going to be the handrail? Well, it's going to be the one called handrail. And Revit has a kind of funny way of turning off the handrail, which is to say, here when you look in the field for position, we can just check there's a down arrow that probably allows you to select different positions, and it does. There's an option for none, and that's how you get rid of the handrail. I'll just hit apply, and you should see the handrail disappear, and it does. And I could add a handrail to the opposite side if I so desired. One last thing I can do here is I can change the height of the handrail. And because this is such a simple handrail, it really just has a top rail. And I can just change the height here. I'll make it 4 feet and hit apply. And you can see that the handrail grows and all the balusters remain glued to the handrail. And there you go. There's a lovely handrail. Well, what if I don't like that railing? What if I want to make something a little more dramatic? Well, you can absolutely start adding and changing the placement of horizontal rails, vertical rails, the balusters. You can go and draw custom profiles, which is easy, but even easier is to steal it from another project. And the folks at Revit know this. They have provided in the Autodesk library, and I have Canvas site, a bunch of different railing types. And you can actually just copy and paste these into your project. For example, I think the railing with panels may be one of the default ones, or perhaps the guardrail with glass panels. If I like one, for example, let's go with this deco type here. And you can see them in action on stairs too. But if I like this one, I can literally just copy and paste it into my project. I'm going to go here to the mezzanine, Control V to paste it in. You might get a message saying there's stuff in here that's similar already. I'll click to place the object. And you can see here when you paste an object, it does give you a sort of verify option here. You should verify it or else it won't load into your project. And that's kind of what's going on here. You're loading these into the kind of ready-made available database of family types in your project. You can also purge family types from your project if it's starting to bog down a little bit. That's under the Manage tab. But for now, I'm going to bring this in now. Of course, I don't actually need this one. I've already drawn the railing, so I'm going to delete it right away. But what you'll find is now when I select the railing here and go to the family type selector, there it is. There's my deco type of railing. And let's tile our windows here and take a look at what that looks like. And I'm just going to, up here on this view cube, I'm going to click the front button to give me essentially an elevation view. And this is a really nice view when you want to kind of check the composition of your drawing. And you can see this railing type, it's quite nice, and it also provides end balusters. Now, if I don't like those end balusters, just like I didn't like the handrail, I can come in here and choose Edit Type. Once again, you have to have it selected. And when you go to baluster placement, what you'll find, of course, this is pretty complicated because there are sub-balusters, these kind of minor and major ones here. We're not going to touch those, but down at the bottom of the baluster interface here, you can see that there's a start post and an end post. And we can change those and we can get rid of them. In fact, there's even a little preview button. I'm going to click that so you can see what this thing looks like. And if I change this, so for example, if I just come up here and choose none, you should hopefully see if I hit apply. Oh yeah, there it goes. It's all gone. I can make it go away. And of course, there's corner posts which occur when there's a bend, but I just want to get rid of it here. And there are all sorts of other types in here. And what's essentially going on is these are families within this family. And it does get quite complicated to get rid of all these things and modify them because the nested families are, well, let's just say, a little bit rich. But needless to say, most elements of these sorts of things, these complex building elements, are modified via the parameters, not by changing the way they're drawn. And to go back to your drawing, you kind of have to click through all the layers of this onion that is our railing in order to see your drawing again. So I'll just click OK here, and I think I already hit apply, maybe, and OK. And then here you'll hit apply, OK. And there you go, you have your modified railing. So next up here in our menu is a ramp. We're just going to draw a simple ramp to the back door of the building. So I'm here in my floor plan view, but I like I have done with the railing, I have the 3D view visible so that you can see what's happening real time. And ramps, once again, they're very simple in some ways, but also complicated in others. Just click the tool, and this is a sketched item. So I'm in sketch mode, everything gets gray. And there's a couple of options for drawing a ramp. If you have just a simple ramp, you just draw it by the run. And this one is, really just going to go up 6 inches. So I think that's the simplest. You can also draw an irregular boundary if you want something that has an unusual shape. And also you can draw it if you have a specific kind of height that you want. But for us, that's fine. However, the one thing you need to be aware of with ramps is that they make use of reference planes. And we've talked about this when we looked at elevations. There are these reference planes here in our model for the base level and the top level of the ramp. Now, I do not want a ramp that goes up to the second floor or the mezzanine. I just want one that goes from 6 inches below the main ground floor up to the ground floor. And make sure that you have a minus sign next to that 6 inches. I'm not sure if I remember to do that. That puts it below the ground floor. Anyway, the other thing you can do here is you can control whether or not there are graphics. So for example, I could show an up arrow if I wanted. I can have it say up and down. And I can also control the width. So for example, 3 feet, that's a little tight and actually probably not meeting sort of ADA standards, but also if they're carrying out a garbage can or something, that's a little tight. We can be generous and make this 4 feet, okay? Also, how do I know how slopey this thing is? Well, now you have to edit the family type. And I'll go in here and look at the family parameters, and there's any number of different types of things, including the construction. I can make it an exterior versus an interior one, which doesn't actually change the way it looks. Finally, you can change the slope here. Slope is usually given in, say, a 1/12 number, 1 foot up for, or 1 foot over for every 1 foot up for every 12 feet over. So, and this is a built-in parameter, and this is a typical thing. With a 1/12 ramp, you do need a railing. With a 1/20 or more shallow ramp, you don't actually need a. This will automatically generate the railing when we do this because it knows that, because it's so smart. So I'll click OK, and I will draw the ramp. Now the fun thing is when you draw the ramp, the program will actually give you an indication of how long it's going to be. You just go to the kind of very end of the box, that's the preview, and it says 6 inches of incline ramp created, 0 inches remaining. And that's your ramp. You can just click the checkbox, and like magic, you have a ramp. And look at that, it even got some railings on it. And those, guess what? Those are nested components or sort of linked components. These we can change to be a different type of railing. So for example, a guardrail, rectangular, I can choose that for both of these. I don't know why only one changed. And there we go. The other thing is that because these are railings that have a direction, we see these flippers show up, which allow you to make the handrail go on the inside, which obviously is very important because that's where it's supposed to be. It doesn't do you much good if it's on the outside. And I'm going to put in a little landing here just by using a floor. But one thing I wanted to show you while I'm in this sketch mode of the floor is that you can actually make the floor sloped by just selecting one of the edges of the floor. And like we did with roofs, you can tell it, hey, define a slope. And then you can define the slope that way. You can also add in a slope arrow as a way to define the slope. And it's a big honking arrow. And what it will do is when the arrow is in, if this is great if you want to slope like a whole slab, you can just tell it, okay, at the tail it's going to be 1 feet, and at the head it's going to be 0, so it will slope up. Now, of course, I don't want to do any of that. I just want it to be a floor. So I'll just click checkbox here. And one thing about railings, handrails along a stair or ramp, is that they do have to have these kind of returns at the end of the run. And we can actually change that. We just go here and choose Edit Type. And if you look at the menu here, there's the handrail. And when you choose the type of handrail, so I'm just going to click on where it says circular 1.5 inches. Click the little ellipsis, the 3 dots. And that brings up the type of handrail and some of the interesting features about it. And one of them is an extension. So at the bottom, you typically have an extension that either curves around or it can also go right into the ground. And here, the extension style, I'm going to make it go into the floor rather than return it to the wall because I don't have a wall. And I'm going to make it stick out 1 foot, which I believe is the code requirement. And let's take a look at what that looks like by just hitting apply and OK. We can preview it here if we want and see how it has an extension over there. And that looks really good. And we can do that at both ends of the railing so that you have a railing that extends into the sort of slab for the landing and also the slab for the... Maybe I'll have one that has returns into the railing itself. You can also specify an end post here if you so desire. To do that, we need to delve into yet another menu here, and this is the baluster placement menu. I'll choose Edit, and once again, kind of like the railings, you can see that the balusters here for the starting and end post, remember we removed these from our deco railing type. Now I can just change it to match the top rail, which I believe is a square 2-inch one. Oh yeah, that looks right. Square 2-inch. And like magic, we have a different sort of railing. Oop, what did I do? I did the wrong one. Finally, something looks a little weird here. If you zoom in on the preview, there's like a little offset on this top railing. I'm not quite sure why that's in there. I guess it thinks maybe it's a handrail. But if we go here to the top rail, click on the profile type, and then the 3 boxes to get sort of more information about that profile type, you'll see, oh yes, there is a clearance here that they've left for the hand. I'm not quite sure. Maybe it's a legacy. Anyway, you can make that 0, and like magic, you've got yourself, oh, now it seems a little off too, but anyway, you should be able to get it to be at least pretty close. And apply, and OK, and like magic, both of your guardrails around the outside of the ramp have proper guardrails and handrails. We don't actually need a guardrail here around the landing because it's actually not high enough. You need, I think, 27 inches before you need a guardrail at a landing. And when you're moving a ramp or stair also, just make sure you get the whole kit and caboodle. If I just click on the ramp, sometimes the railings come detached, and I want to move the landing anyway, so I'll just click and grab it, and I'll move it over here to the front wall, and I'll just nudge it down in place. I could be a little more precise, but that's pretty good for what we're doing here. And there's your landing with your ramp and railings. I know what you're thinking. You thought that making that ramp was so fun. You're thinking, gosh, are there any other types of objects that make use of these complex nested family types, such as the ramp? And in fact, yes, there are. There is a stair. And a stair, like you might imagine, I'm just going to click on that one. It's quite similar to a ramp, except that it has steps instead of it's sloped. That's fairly obvious, but also it can be sketched in a number of different kind of standard configurations. Just like we saw with the ramp, first of all, you can control the basic parameters by coming here and looking at the properties of the stair once you've launched the tool. And for example, one of the things that you can force it to do is have an actual tread dimension. And if you know your building codes, a code-compliant stair for a non-residential application, the minimum tread depth is 11 inches. Now, you might say, well, what about the riser? And this, you can see here in the name, it says 7-inch max riser, 11-inch tread. If we look at the family type here, you'll see that, lo and behold, it has a maximum riser height, a minimum tread depth, and a minimum run width. And these are all kind of code controlled items. Now, we can, like we did before, we can make this a little wider. Maybe I'll make it 44 inches, which is pretty much as narrow as you're going to want to go with a code-compliant stair, just thanks to the ADA. And in the Properties menu, just like we saw before, there are calculation rules, and then there's also kind of the construction and how it's all supported. But let's not deal with that right now. I'll just hit Apply and OK, and start sketching. And the typical way to sketch a stair is by run. And I'll just draw a simple straight run stair first, And here, I'll draw it across the front so you can really see it go. And as you draw it, you can see here it's telling me how many risers I've created and how many are remaining. So you just go all the way to the end until it says 0 remaining and click, and like magic, you've got a stair. Now, the stair, once you've got the kind of preview that once you've drawn it, you can either continue to edit, draw additional stairs, or you just click the Finish Edit mode. Like magic, it creates the stair, and look at that, it even adds in the railings. And this is an object like the ramp, where you do need to move the whole kit and caboodle. And of course, with stairs, there are practical considerations like, is there enough space to get on to the stair, and then is there enough space to at the landing? This one, the answer is no, so we're going to delete it and try another stair. I'll just again click the stair tool, and this time when I draw it, I'll show you how it can create a landing for you. And the beauty of this is, as you draw, you can see it's creating risers, and as you go, I'm going to start. I'll create maybe 10 risers here. You can see that it's half drawn. Now I'm going to move my mouse over to the right here, and you see how it gives me that little extension line? That aligns the next run of stairs with the first run. And now I can just keep going, and I'm basically creating kind of a dogleg stair. And because I'm still in edit mode, I can grab the stair and kind of nudge it over. So there's usually a little bit of space in between the kind of stringers to allow you to put the thing together to edit, to not edit it, to construct it. But you'll want to leave that. And you can, of course, try to make it an exact dimension. But you can see that's a pretty convincing stair. And you just, when you're done laying it out, you click the finish mode, and there you go. You'll have a finished stair. And it may tell you, oh, that was a little tight. See how it's saying the rail is not continuous. And I believe it's this joint is getting a little complicated. It had trouble resolving that little corner. So I could go back here, hit undo, just Control Z, which you can't see. And I'll hit undo again. And you see how I can undo my nudging. I'll click the Finish Edit mode again and see if it gives me an error. And in fact, it doesn't. And you see how in the calculation rules, it has a way of resolving these complex corners. Finally, it is a stair, which needs to align with the second floor so that they land in the correct place. And you might say, well, geez, how do I do that? I could just go up to the mezzanine here, and that's probably the easiest way, and then use the Align tool. Click Align, grab the edge of the second floor, which is this one, and then click on the stair edge, and like magic, the stair pops into position. By the way, when you have used the Align tool, be aware that now if I move this and I just kind of click and drag to move, which we all love doing, you can easily mess up the alignment. So once I've used the Align tool, I either use it again if I want this, say, against the outer wall, or I come in and I use the Move tool, the actual bona fide move tool, not just the click and drag tool. And that way you can move something some exact dimension. Now I've aligned this with the outer wall here just to show you that these elements, they are independent of each other. So I can edit this railing by just double clicking on it. And I actually want to get rid of this part of the sketch. I'm going to delete it. And the reason I'm going to delete it, and I'll just click that, see how it goes away, is I just need a handrail against the wall. I don't need the full-on guardrail and handrail. So I can draw a new railing along the wall, and I've just copied and pasted in the handrail type from that railing family's drawing that I showed earlier. The trick with drawing railings on a stair is that you need to tell Revit, I'm drawing it on the stair. And you have to use the Pick Host button. You click on that, and of course, as you mouse around, it will allow you some options. I could just draw this upper run, but I think I'm going to make it a continuous handrail. And now when I draw my line, and I'll just draw it all the way down to the end of the run of stairs, and then continue the last little piece here. That should allow me to have a completed handrail. And you can see that here in the 3D view. I also did shorten up the second rail a second floor guardrail with a strange newel post on there. I don't know why I put that in. Finally, I did want to show you how to draw a circular stair, since we all love circular stairs. Now, technically, they're not really legal for non-residential applications. Winders are what I think is legal. I'm going to draw one here, and we draw it the same way. You draw it using a run. The big difference is, of course, this is a circular thing. So as you move your mouse out, you can see that the stair gets kind of wider or less wide, and it still gives you that preview. You just don't want the stair to kind of wind on itself. That's a little more complicated to draw. But in this case, it's basically the same. It tells you how many risers you've got left to go. Click when you're done, and like magic, you've got yourself a stair. Oh, except I put it up on the second floor. Whoops. And this does bring up a point, which is if something goes wrong with your stairs, it's often easier to just redraw them. Let the computer figure out the redrawing rather than try to fix them. Often it's just impossible. So I'm going to start from the lower level. The main reason is it's using calculation rules. Maybe the floor heights are different or something like that. But once it's drawn, and I'll just click the finish mode, it will add in the railing for you. The other thing to notice, when you select the stair, you can flip the direction. There's a little arrow. In this case, it's kind of hard to see under my up sign, but I can make it start in a different direction. And like before, you can change the railing and all that. Now, one thing you may notice as you look at my funky stair, and by the way, you can draw either of these stairs for your project. In my case, I'm showing you both, but I think I'll delete that dogleg stair and just use the circular one because I think it's pretty. But you can draw it, or you can draw some sort of custom stair if you so desire. Anyway, the problem here is that my stair goes through the ceiling. This circular one, I need to cut a hole through the ceiling and the second floor slab. Now, there are two ways that you can cut openings, and if you notice here, there's a whole little section in Revit that has openings. The simplest way is to just cut an opening by face, and I can just click on a surface. It edits the surface, and then I can draw whatever I want, and I could try to draw it here, or I could actually be a little more precise and draw it in reflected ceiling plan. But that's one way to draw an opening, and that's great if you just want, say, an opening in a wall or a floor. In our case, let's draw what's called a shaft opening. And for this one, I'm going to click the shaft tool. It's a sketched object. I can even use the objects that are here. I'm not sure it's going to let me, but let's try. Sometimes it doesn't work. Yeah, it's letting us grab that one. And once you've gotten the one of the objects selected, now one thing you may notice as you look at my funky stair, and by the way, you can draw either of these stairs for your project. In my case, I'm showing you both, but I think I'll delete that dogleg stair and just use the circular one because I think it's pretty. But you can draw it, or you can draw some sort of custom stair if you so desire. Anyway, the problem here is that my stair goes through the ceiling. This circular one, I need to cut a hole through the ceiling and the second floor slab. Now, there are two ways that you can cut openings, and if you notice here, there's a whole little section in Revit that has openings. The simplest way is to just cut an opening by face, and I can just click on a surface. It edits the surface, and then I can draw whatever I want, and I could try to draw it here, or I could actually be a little more precise and draw it in reflected ceiling plan. But that's one way to draw an opening, and that's great if you just want, say, an opening in a wall or a floor. In our case, let's draw what's called a shaft opening. And for this one, I'm going to click the shaft tool. It's a sketched object. I can even use the objects that are, and the trick is often to kind of zoom in. We've got a railing, we've got all sorts of different outlines here, but the outermost one is probably the right one. I'll click on that, and you can see it's got a loop. Now, these are objects that need to be continuous loops, so we may need to do some monkey business to draw in that last little bit of arc. And I'll just use the start end radius arc, which is a nice one. You can draw the two endpoints, and then usually Revit guesses what the tangent is of the adjacent. And there you go. You've got yourself a loop. Now, the other thing is these are basically objects which cut through any sort of building element that they run into. And so you have to choose where they start. Now, I'm going to go and I'm going to make this go from maybe a few feet below the mezzanine, because I can't remember how high that ceiling is. And then I'll make it go to just above the mezzanine. Okay. Again, you really have to get used to using these reference lines. I don't want it to go all the way through the roof. If I did, of course, I could do that if I was putting in an elevator or something like that. And one last thing about this opening is that you do need a landing, and you can't really draw in a floor because the shaft opening will cut through any floor you draw. So probably the best bet is to actually modify the profile of your shaft so that it creates a landing out of sort of the leftover wedge of floor. Anyway, you click the Finish Edit mode. You'll see there's kind of a tube in my model. And when I click off of it, it automatically should generate holes through the second floor that allow my object to land. And it's smart enough to know not to cut through the stairs, because that's the thing I want to poke through. And now my stair can actually make it through the second floor without whacking your head. And that, of course, is a typical rookie mistake, is having your head bump on the way up the stairs. I recommend for this sort of thing using a shaft, mainly because you do often have stairs, you have ceilings in addition to the floor. Finally, I should put a railing in up at this opening so that people don't, fall through the hole. And I should mention that there is a stair sample file that is provided by Autodesk here, and there's all sorts of different construction techniques. This is great because you can, like you did with the railing, copy and paste these in and come up with some pretty nice, sophisticated stairs that work with the aesthetics of your project without having to recreate them for your project, which they are, as you can imagine, quite complicated and can use all sorts of stringers and other elements which can be hard to figure out. So take advantage of that. Now, if you do have straight stairs, sometimes you have to do something like draw a wall under the stair to prevent people from walking underneath. That's another rule, another code rule. You're not allowed to walk under those awkward spaces. To do that, I'm going to draw two short walls under the edge of the stair. And I'll just do that real quickly. And one little trick, by the way, just if you want to see, say, the stairs and its immediate environs, you can select the stair, and there's this cute little tool that we can use to kind of isolate the rest of the building. Just click on the stairs, and there's this section box tool, which will kind of isolate this element using that same section box you had active before. It's still there. I just have it hidden right now. Anyway, here is my stair with the walls underneath. And let me click on this front view, so I'm kind of operating in an orthographic view. This is just a lot nicer as you're working to effect changes. And in this case, I can just click on the wall, and there's a dragger, and I can drag it up to the underside of the stair. I can even lock it in position so I don't accidentally change it. Now, what about the other side? Let me drag this view around, and I'll just click on the right side to get my elevation view. Now, this wall is a little bit more problematic because, as you can see, I can drag it up and down, but it doesn't really work with this. But here what you can do, there's for flat walls, you can edit the profile. And here's just a little video. You can edit the profile, and you can have kind of boxes within boxes, which is kind of nice. I'll just click that button. And I can drag this up to the top, and it will start giving you warnings because all sorts of constraints are going to going to be it locks things together. So for example, if I want to drag this line so that it moves up against this angled stringer, it wouldn't let me do it if there was still a constraint. Anyway, I can drag these lines together, and once again, it's going to say, I put that line there. You're moving it. And you do have to make sure that you have no overlaps. All the pieces need to meet. If you're having trouble seeing the overlaps, you can always use this trim tool. And this works the same way as in good old AutoCAD. You just click on the trim tool, click on one line, and then the other, and it will join them. And sometimes there'll be sort of microscopic little joins in there that you don't have. But now that profile should match the underside of the stair. And of course, it's going to say, hey, I had to remove some parameters to make this work. But now I have a nice wall under my stairs. Nobody will get injured in the production of this building. For now, the spiral stair, if you wanted a wall underneath the bottom of that spiral stair, which would probably look funny with that open metal stair that I've drawn, you would definitely want to draw that as what's called a mass, which we will learn about in a later lesson. There are a couple of tools which are fun as far as these things go. One is called model text, and this is sort of like the 3D text in SketchUp. You can type in whatever you want and OK, and you'll need to tell Revit which work plane you want to work on. So you just click the Set Work Plane button, and usually you can get away with picking a plane, which is kind of the easiest, I find. You just have to mouse over the edge of the plane that you want to select. You see how as I move my mouse over these edges, they get highlighted. I could put it on the roof. Let's put it on this back wall. And now when you go to place the model text, oh, what happened to it? It should recognize where you want it to go. One nice thing about model text, you can select it, and this is unlike in SketchUp. You can come in, select it, and actually make all sorts of changes to how deep it is. For example, you could make it, 12 inches deep, and apply, and it will stick out a little more. And you can actually change the font, and we love fonts. Everybody loves fonts. So there you go. Really fun. The other thing you can do is draw using model lines. We don't do this a whole lot, but it works in a very similar way. You'll want to define the surface that you want to draw on first. It remembers that that's where we were drawing from last time. And OK. And now with your model lines, you can just come in and draw whatever sort of thing you want. These aren't great because they unfortunately don't render particularly well, so we tend not to use the model lines all that much. So let's say we want to add trim to our building. There's interior trim and exterior trim, things like crown moldings and cornices and that sort of thing. That is pretty easy in Revit. The trick is that modifying them is actually what I like to call menu madness. It's just pretty hard to do in Revit. But I'll show you. First of all, to put in a piece of trim, you go to the wall tool, and we saw this earlier. There's some other things hidden under that wall tool. In this case, there's something called wall sweep. And it's super simple. You just take a pre-drawn profile, and you can sweep it along a wall in a linear fashion. So I'll just click the wall sweep, and there's a default one called cornice, and I'll just click at the top of the wall to place one of those. And then you have to click off of it in order to see it, and it is a thing of beauty. It is basically a rectangular piece sticking out from the outer wall. These elements can be copied just like other elements. Just select it, and you can either create a similar one if you want, or you can just control and click and drag, and it will make a copy. It does kind of get a little funky when you do that. It x-rays into your model. I don't know why it does that. Anyway, so if I wanted to create, say, the lintel over this window, I could just drag this down. I can even shorten the object here, or I can use the Align tool to force it to kind of snap to the top of the window. And there you go. I could even lock it in position as we've seen before. And I can copy this guy and maybe make it as a windowsill here. Let me just drag it down into position, or like we've done before, use the align tool. And the trick is here, when you do this, when you use the copy tool, sometimes you end up with these kind of little scruffy bits, more often than not around doors and things. So the sweeps will connect to the other elements in your project and make reference to walls, doors, and windows. Of course, these are hideous looking. We don't really want to use these as our lintel and sill. And what you can do is, and now is where we get into the menu world, you can select one of these, choose Edit Type, and what we can do, these have family types, and we can duplicate the family type, and I'll just call this windowsill for now. And the profile that is used, the outline of the window, is over here, and it's sort of a sub component. It is a nested component. So in this case, it's a square or a rectangle. We can come here and look and see if there's any other profiles in here, and guess what? There are. And for us, let's try a precast sill. Let's go with a 5-inch wide one. I don't want it to stick out too far. And each of these is created in a separate file that Revit makes reference to. So I'll click OK. And like magic, you can see that my sill has changed its profile. And in fact, it sticks into the building. And it's, of course, it's a lot shorter than the other profile. So I need to use my align tool. Again, I can even do that in 3D. You just have to make sure that you're grabbing the correct 3D reference plane. And there you go, you've got a nice looking sill. Now, what about this head? This one's a little trickier because we don't have a ready-made profile that is going to be what I want it to be. And how do I know this? Well, because I've already looked at all the profiles and there isn't one. So we have to load one in from outside. And if I go here, this is like when we added components, you just go to the Autodesk family, load Autodesk family, and up pops the Autodesk family online library. And if we go down here, there's a section called profiles. And lo and behold, there's all sorts of fun shapes that we can recognize here. They are actually organized in subcategories. So for example, this wall base, this is an interior wall base, and by all means I can load that in, and I think I will because I like that one. But you can also go to the concrete group, and there's just a kind of rectangular beam here that we can load in. That's probably good enough for our lintel. And I'll choose load, and like magic, nothing happens. Why not? Because we need to start digging into the menus. So I'll select my header here, my lintel, choose edit type, and now under profiles, with any luck, I'll have that rectangular beam here, choose 12 by 24, and apply, and OK. And you might think, that's awfully big for a lintel. And yes, it is. And so now we need to talk about families. Let's talk about our family. And in this case, let's talk about these precast beam families. How do you edit that? You can't draw on it. You can't modify it by clicking it. There's no handles other than the length handles. Unfortunately, with Revit, you also can't edit it through the menu. You have to actually find the family. Do a little genealogical research here down in the project browser. There's a whole section called families. And if you go down in that, there's a whole section for profiles, and I've already opened it up. And in that section, you can find the concrete rectangular beam profile. And this is kind of, Revit 101 in terms of its need sort of sub menus. So here's the one I just used. I'm going to right click on it and show the type properties. And we've seen properties before. You just can't access them directly by clicking on objects. Here you have to find it in the family menu. But we can duplicate this and make our own custom profile. I don't think I want it to be quite so wide. 12 by 25 is pretty wide. So I'm going to make it just stick out about 2 inches by, say, 16 high. OK. Now, remember, changing the name does not change the dimensions. You do actually have to type in the dimensions. And remember that you have to type in the inches symbol if you want inches. Otherwise, Revit will make them into feet. And apply, and OK. And now, once again, nothing happens. And the reason is because our molding here, our wall sweep, needs to be modified. We need to choose this new profile that we created. Here's the old one. You should find the new one here in the list. And that's kind of how Revit works. It has these nested components that kind of all make reference to each other, and in order to make visual modifications, sometimes you have to just dig through the menus to find the object. And there you go. There's my molding, and I can make it organized, and obviously copy it, paste it, and have infinite variation. And once you have all these different objects, you can use your Modify tool and select them. Just remember to hold down Control when you select them. And you can copy and paste them. Now, I could Control drag, but I also can use that feature to Control C to copy. I know you can't see that, but I just did that. And then you can paste it aligned to selected levels. And I can just paste these guys right up onto the mezzanine. And there you go. Instant window, although I guess it did kind of do a little weirdness there. Not sure why. But there you go. Sweeps are pretty simple in that regard. However, now let's try adding sweeps to interior elements and elements all throughout the project all at once. And to do that, you actually need to select a wall. So I'm going to select the exterior wall first. And now we get even deeper into menus. We'll choose Edit Type. And now we have the menu where we were able to control the height and other elements of our basic wall. But now let's click on Structure. And the Structure menu says how the wall is built. Now, right now, this wall is very simple. There's just structure. There's no interior, exterior finish. Sometimes you'll see things like vapor barriers and layers of plaster or tile. But this is nice for our model. We can see this in preview here on the left, and you do have an option to either view it in plan, which I believe is the default. Let's put it in section view. That way we can see where we are placing these elements that are going to go on all instances of this wall. And when you put it in section view, you will see down here that there are all sorts of options, but the one we're interested in is the sweeps option. So I'll choose sweeps, and I will add a new sweep because I don't have any in here yet. And the way this works is you insert a new sweep, you tell the program where it's going to go, and which profile it is going to be. So I'm going to choose one here. I believe there is a parapet cap that we can add, a precast parapet cap, and basically we can put it at the top of the wall. And this is so handy because when we do this, and there's other options here, there's interior and exterior side, and there's an orientation feature, but for us, basically you click OK, and like magic, there is my molding that shows up on the entire project. And I'll just click OK a couple of times here so we can see what happens. Don't forget to hit apply. And like magic, now my model has an exterior parapet. And if you've got your walls oriented correctly, you should see the parapet showing up on the entire thing. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, gee, can't we do the same and get all interior walls to have a wall base? And guess what? We can. It's really pretty simple. You just do the same thing we just did. Select the wall that you want to have this wall base around the entire thing. I added a little extra wall in here too. And get its properties and go to the structure and make sure that you are viewing the structure in section. And you can even zoom in and out on it. And then you just add in some sweeps on the inside and the outside. And if you remember, I loaded in a wall base. I think I'll use about a 4.5-inch wall base. And it should show up at the bottom of the wall, and it should show up in either the exterior or the interior. I'll leave it as interior for now. I can also duplicate this profile, so I get exactly the same one, and put this on the interior. Now, when I hit apply and OK, you should see at the base of your wall 2 itty-bitty little pieces of trim. How cool is that? And you can do the same thing with crown moldings and even things like wainscoting you can add in this way. So I'll just click OK through the menus. And again, you have to kind of cycle through all the menus. But what you should see is all of your walls, your interior walls, have a little base on them. Could we do this with the exterior wall? Absolutely, we could. The problem is our exterior wall actually goes into the ground. So if you were to add these bases onto the wall, it would be underground. So that's not so good. So you can still go ahead and create a sweep that uses this profile and add it to the interior walls. Now, the one last thing to know about sweeps is that they don't actually cover the ends of walls. Sometimes we have these sort of little ends exposed. And Revit does allow you to modify those. I'm going to change the scale of this view, by the way, to, let's make it 1/2 inch, just so it's a little easier to see what's going on. Obviously, a small scale fit drawing is going to be kind of blurry. But then you just select the sweeps and choose Modify Returns. And you should be able to add a return over here just by clicking with this kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, pencil, knife? Not really sure. But now when you click on it, there's another grip available, and you can drag it all the way around to the other end. It does leave a little line there, but you'll see later on those will disappear. And of course, it's a pretty tiny detail in a pretty big project. Finally, as you add in wall sweeps around your project, sometimes you'll find that Revit doesn't want to put them at the base of the wall, and you have to kind of put them in up high and use the Align tool. And then sometimes it usually does a pretty good job making its way around doors and windows. Sometimes it doesn't. You see how we have a kind of little extra piece here that goes across the door, causing a tripping hazard. You can just shorten that right up, and then you'll have to do it again. You'll have to go and add another sweep, and I'll just click this and choose Create Similar. And then you can just select the new wall here, the new sweep, I mean, and modify it so that it's short here down by the width of the window. And I find this usually works pretty good because it will modify around the door pretty well, and then you can just drag this guy down, or you could even just nudge it down until it's in the right spot. Hopefully nobody is spending a lot of time looking at the corners of your building. And then you can also add in sweeps upstairs if you so desire, and you should. You should pretty much always have some kind of wall base. So put your model in a view where you can see all the good stuff you've created, and export a PDF for posting.